Um, Introduction to single-page applications. We're going to talk about what an SPA is, what are some of the advantages of an SPA. There are maybe some downsides, not really, but well, let's put it this way. There's some challenges that you may have to deal with. They're not insurmountable problems, but they are issues that you have to be aware of and deal with properly. Things like search engine optimization and things like instrumentation and you know, things like that are not that straightforward. And then we'll talk specifically about using Angular for doing SPAs. So in a single page application, we make a distinction between what traditionally were called web pages and contrast that with what we call views within an SPA. So pages usually imply a URL that goes to a web server and comes back with a response message that contains the markup, right? The page is returned. Views are more about what a component will render within the single page application. So these are also represented by URLs, but they're not URLs that go to the web server. They're URLs that are handled by routing within the single page application itself. That's what the next chapter is about. So traditional applications would load an HTML document for every request, but in a single page application, we just load a single initial HTML document from the server, and then we work semi-independently from that point on. So we like to use JavaScript and JavaScript libraries such as Angular to implement our views locally. We can do that in a number of ways. We can do that by displaying or hiding HTML elements. In an Angular application, we can use ng class to control the visibility of elements. We can also use it to control the visibility of entire components. Okay, so we can control the visibility of elements within a component. So that's a finer granularity, or we can use the ng class attribute. Remember we talked about these attributes earlier, right? So that's what they call that's what they call a directive. So attribute directives and structural directives. Remember we were talking about that? So you can use attribute directives to control the visibility of individual elements within a component or at the level of entire components. Or you can switch over and use structural directives to conditionally include or not include certain content within the page. So those are the ways we have available to us. And in addition, that's without routing, right? In addition to that, as an alternative, we can also use Angular's built-in routing mechanism to actually route to different components as we navigate from view to view within the application. So this chapter is really just a precursor to the next chapter. We're just kind of talking about the different approaches that are possible. We'll take a look more specifically at the particular option that is known as routing in the next chapter. Of course, we can also use JavaScript to upload and retrieve data to and from the web server whenever we need to. And when we talk about HTML5, there's a couple of APIs that we use. There's one called history and another one called local storage. There's actually quite a few of them. So the HTML5 APIs, these are JavaScript APIs that are available to us within any modern web browser that supports the HTML5 specification. So the history API can be used to programmatically tell the browser that it is going from view to view and to maintain the history so that we can use the back button to go back to a previous view. Or we can hit the forward button to go back to, go back and forth through the list of our history. We can also set bookmarks and then later go back to specific views using that feature of the browser. And also individual views might need to store data for the long term to contain state information that is saved and restored every time you go back to a particular view. And that's where local storage comes in handy. But if you want to know more about history and local storage and all of the other HTML APIs that are available, like WebSockets and web workers and so on. So just let's see if we can find some information on APIs. Let's go to Wikipedia. See if we can find something there. So we see that we have APIs for file I/O and for geolocation, and there's various APIs that are more specific to mobile devices, like access to camera hardware and microphone hardware, and applications that are available on that. If we go to HTML5 here, they should also indicate that there are APIs for managing video and audio for multimedia, as well as a Canvas API for doing two-dimensional graphics in JavaScript within a Canvas element. Here are various APIs. So there's the history API, which we were just talking about. And there's also web storage for saving key value pairs in local storage. There's geolocation, there's various kinds of databases, there's real-time communications, WebRTC, there's web audio, there's file I/O. And so there's actually quite a few of them, right? But this shows a few of them as well. So Canvas and audio, and it's a little bit hard to read some of those. But what I'm trying to say is that there's a whole bunch of APIs available. They're just focusing on two of those that happen to be pertinent to this particular topic, right? So history and local storage are two APIs that are quite useful in implementing single-page applications. And so the SPA workflow, when you're using a single-page application, usually the user clicks on a link to open an online, okay, for example, an online email application. So it's going to look something like this with a bunch of emails that are displayed, and one of them catches your eye and you click on it, and it's going to replace the contents of the web browser with the details of that particular email, right? So this is like a master detail type relationship, and this is just one of many possible scenarios, right? So you click on a link and it shows you the details. So the browser is going to retrieve and load the initial HTML page from the server. It's going to display the initial list of emails that we see here. And the user is going to click on an email, and the contents of the page will be replaced with the details of that email. Now, up here, we've got this back button, right? We've got the back button and the forward button. So in my browser right here, that's what they look like over here. So that's the back button, that's the forward button. And so if this was fetching a web page from a web server, the web browser would be aware of that history, and it would know when to enable the back button and when to enable the forward button. But when you're working within a single page application, the browser doesn't have any clue about what's going on. So you have to programmatically tell the browser as you go through a sequence of views, you navigate from one view to another. And so you need to programmatically tell the browser that we have visited here and then here and then here so that it can maintain a history. So most web browsers support back button, forward button, they're enabled and disabled automatically when used in a traditional way, but they have to be helped with code when you're doing it within an SPA. And also you can set favorites and bookmark and things like that as well. But all of that's available through an API, which you typically need to implement within an SPA type of an application. Now, the good news is that this back button support, all that history, Angular looks after that. So you don't have to worry about it. Angular provides a routing infrastructure which supports navigation. And every time you navigate from one view to another within an Angular application, Angular will automatically interact with the browser to keep it up to date with what's happening so that that just works, right? If you didn't have Angular, then you would be responsible for calling into that JavaScript API to manage that history. So traditional web applications, you navigate to new page using anchor links. You navigate to previous page using the back button. You can return to pages using bookmarks. Specific pages can be accomplished by manually editing the URL in the address bar. We're all familiar with those capabilities of a browser, right?